Welcome to the PlantFit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Dr. Vivian Chen. Dr. Chen has 14 years of experience as a doctor in the UK. She trained in internal medicine and dermatology in London before moving into family practice. We start the conversation with Dr. Chen sharing about the impact of over-sanitization and social isolation on the immune system. Enjoy the presentation.
A really good question. And I think it really needs like a holistic overall view, because immune system is not just like a system that works by itself. It interacts with our nervous system, with our endocrine system, and like you said, interacts with our environment. And so many different aspects of our lifestyle can impact our immunity. Nutrition, how much we sleep, how much sunshine we get, and even emotional factors. So like if you're socially isolated or feeling lonely, that can actually impact your immune health as well. And so it's really unfortunate that we are in this situation. It's like unprecedented circumstances. And, we do have to keep the population safe. So, some of these measures were necessary. But it's really important, like you said, to be mindful of still trying to, get out into the sunshine, get out into nature, and not just be cooped up at home, still maintain some sort of social interaction with your friends, like, for example, on Zoom, if you can't see them face to face, because we know that all of these things can contribute to good immune health.
Unpacking immune health and the immune system, maybe you can describe or explain what the immune system is.
So the immune system is basically our body's defense against any foreign pathogen or a foreign substance that may threaten us. And so in this circumstances, a virus, the immune system, there's two parts of the immune system, the innate and the adaptive part. So you can think of it, it's a really complex system, but if you're going to whittle it down to the basics, you can think of it as like one part is like the immediate attack, and then you've got the adaptive where you start to make antibodies, and then that's kind of comes a little bit later. But as soon as the immune system senses a threat, it mounts an attack immediately, and that's usually in the form of things like natural killer cells, phagocytes. So these neutrophils, these come to the scene and start to attack the viruses by releasing different chemicals and attracting other immune cells to the area. And then you've got the other arm of the immune system where you start to develop antibodies. And as you know, that can take some time, but that's what we test for, right? So a lot of tests for infections test for antibodies, and that's what we're testing for.
Where immunity is concerned, based on what you shared earlier, why is there a focus on interventions versus, building up the immune system, like eating healthier and getting out to nature?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's something I've asked myself numerous times during this time, because, from the very beginning, I was, trying to tell everybody, hey, yes, it may feel really scary and you may feel like things are out of control, but what is within your control is your own health, and what you put on your body, how you manage your stress level, whether you exercise, those things are within our control, and we know that those things contribute to health. And so I don't know whether it's the assumption that people are not interested or too lazy to change their lifestyle. I know a lot of people, a lot of doctors even make that assumption, think, oh, well, I'm not going to talk to my patient about diet because they're never going to do it. And they just kind of write it off. And so I don't know whether it's a combination of that and also the fact that, of course, in any circumstance, pharmaceutical agents always work quicker. They're like the immediate Band-Aid that you can put on a problem to make it go away, right? So a combination of like reluctance of people to change their lifestyle because it requires work, and the fact that pharmaceutical agents are seen as like the quicker action, and maybe even more evidence-based, right? People they want science, they want lab studies, they want these clinical research trials, whereas a piece of garlic, they want which for centuries our ancestors probably have been using for antiviral, antimicrobial properties. They want studies on this. So, and there's nothing wrong with wanting studies. I'm all for that. But, at some point we need to almost come back to the basics and look at what, humans are supposed to do and adapt to in this environment, and focus on those things, those factors.
So you mentioned garlic. Definitely, I want to go into some specific foods and recommendations that you can share with the audience on how they can build a robust immune system. But in your experience coaching clients, have you had people or clients that have come to you expecting that quick fix kind of result? And how do you deal with that?
Always, 100%. It's never tell me what I should eat and how much exercise I should do. It's always, what supplements should I take, right? Because they know that I am not so much into pharmaceuticals. I think there is a time and place. I'm a doctor still at heart, so I, still think that it's a valuable tool, but I always tackle lifestyle first. But because they know I'm not into pharmaceuticals, instead of asking me what medications they should take, they ask me what supplements they should take. And, I think the way we're getting into this dangerous realm where supplements are being used as nutraceuticals. So they're almost like Band-Aids, just like medications, there to cover up a problem. And we're still not getting to the root cause of health issues. Yeah, so I get that a lot. People want quick fixes, but when they actually listen to me and they take the time to make changes, make the effort to make better lifestyle choices, they see that the effects are long term, and it's actually investing for the future, right? Because those effects will start to last. Whereas if you're taking a supplement, the minute you start taking the supplement, the beneficial effect goes away.
I know the Clean Label Project, which we'll probably go into a little bit later, and even things like fish oils are heavy in toxic chemicals and heavy metals as well. So maybe before we get into supplementation, maybe from a kind of macro perspective, you could share what are some of the more known toxins are present in our food system, or what our body is exposed to.
I could talk about it for literally hours, and it can actually get very depressing when I start talking about it. And this is the time when people start to want to switch off, because, it's challenging beliefs that they held that agencies are there to protect us. And, for example, my husband, he wouldn't believe me for years and years, right? Because he says, well, if the products are on the shelf and, if food is being sold to us, then surely somebody somewhere has tested it for safety. And the sad fact is that that's just not the case. And so many chemicals that are in use right now have never been tested for safety, unfortunately. So I think there's around 86,000 chemicals in use, and 60,000 of those were grandfathered in, meaning that before the regulation on safety came into place in 1976, they were already in use, and therefore they were just allowed to carry on being used without ever having its safety profile considered. And I think, the EPA has only tested a handful of safety. And so, the regulations are very much there to, in my opinion, to protect industries and not so much the consumers. Although I do see this trend where consumers are speaking louder and louder and demanding safety and, demand that somebody look out for them. So we're seeing a change. But in terms of food, I think the biggest threat is definitely pesticides, herbicides. It's so widely used, and we see the impact. In California, there was just the class action, billions being paid out to sufferers of glyphosate Roundup use. So I think that just goes to show that consumers are standing up and saying we're not going to accept this. And also, there's a big group of people who still say pesticides don't affect our health, and even some doctors who don't believe it. But the research is there. UCSF has issued this really well-written white paper with many different references showing the effect of pesticides from fertility to child development, neurodevelopment, deformities, all the way through to behavior in children, IQ, and so many different health problems. So I think it's well documented. It's just that there is this resistance to almost believe and kind of open our eyes because it's just too painful, right? When I first realized how many environmental toxins we're faced with, I shut down because it was just kind of like, no, I don't want to face that fact. Like, why do I have to change everything? And, I got angry and I realized that actually didn't help. So we have to take action. We have to take ownership of our own health and be our own advocates for now until regulations change. And so the first place I would start is by cleaning up the food. And I know organic is expensive. It can be expensive, and it can even be really hard to access for some people. And so, the EWG has put together the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. And that's a really useful tool because that kind of sets out the plants with the most pesticide residue. And for those, you should try and buy organic if you can. So if you have a tight budget, prioritize those. And for the other ones, you can buy non-organic. And that's what I personally do. And then, there are different washing techniques. For example, if you make a salt solution, you can increase the amount of pesticides you can wash out of produce, and even like peeling and just running them under clean water can remove so much pesticide as well. So it's important just to be aware so you can start to do something about it. And then other than pesticides, then we're mainly thinking about other toxins like persistent organic pollutants. So this is a big group of chemicals. And the name tells you that these are chemicals that lurk in our environment for a long time by the name persistent. So they break down very slowly, and that's why they build up in our food systems. So they are commonly found in food that's kind of higher up the food chain, so animal products. Because, for example, if a piece of algae in the ocean has accumulated and picked up a little bit of mercury, imagine how much of that algae a fish has eaten. And then that fish is eaten by the next fish on that food chain. And so animal products at the top of the food chain are typically higher in these environmental toxins. And so I'm talking about things like PCB, dioxin, which are byproducts of industrialization, and mercury, so heavy metals, and even PFAS, so the perchlorinated chemicals, the forever chemicals that, because they have got into our water supply and they're kind of in the plants that we grow to feed our animals, you can now find it in animal sources as well.
Oh, and those are just a few that you kind of described.
That's just kind of scratching the surface. Yeah. But those are the main ones. And then that's what's kind of part of the growing process. And then you can think about, well, what about after the food has grown and been prepared, like what it's packaged in? And that's another common source of how these toxins can get into our food supply. So, if it's in a BPA-lined can, or if it's in plastic, then you've got plastic BPA, things like that leaching into the food. PFAS can be part of like those takeaway boxes because that makes those paper boxes waterproof, right? So food doesn't, the juice and sauces from the food doesn't come out, but then, it could be leaching into the food. So there are many different points at which these chemicals get into our food. And I know it can feel really overwhelming when we start to think about it, but I think the key point is prioritize the dirty dozen and try to buy those organic, or if you can't, just make sure you wash them really, really well. and stick to foods lower on the food chain, preferably all plants, because these plant foods actually help us detoxify from these toxins as well, and try to avoid plastic.
While you just mentioned the Dirty Dozen, I'm thinking of places that I've been to in Malaysia, for example, where the fruits that you get are part of the Dirty Dozen and probably the only fruits and vegetables that you can find to a certain degree. Unlike, going to Whole Foods where you can actually have the choice, and in Western societies, you actually have the choice to opt for organic or opt for Clean 15 versus Dirty Dozen. So what would you say to people who are in these regions where all they have in their markets and supermarkets are the Dirty Dozen, where the apples are just so shiny in their wax and you can almost see your own reflection?
I know those. I've seen them. So what I would say is, if you can, try and clean them really well. Okay, so what I talked about earlier, and I share a lot of this information on my Instagram. So, if you make a salt solution, 1 in 10 salt solution, and you soaked, for example, if you were buying strawberries and you kind of soak them for like 5-10 minutes, not so much that where they start to disintegrate, and then rinse them under running water, that can actually remove a decent proportion. And what we got to remember is that it's not been proven, right, yet, whether the benefit of eating fruits, even if it has pesticides in it, might outweigh the harm of eating pesticide-ridden food. So there's, in fruits, there's fruits or vegetables, there's fiber that helps pull out and hold on to toxins. And there's the antioxidants that help us fight the free radicals that might be generated from ingesting toxins and help us detoxify. So it may be that, there might not be overall that much harm just, from eating fruits and vegetables. I think that, if you're going to choose whether you're going to eat fruits or not, eat fruits. That would be my message. Eat fruits, but stay away from the toxin-laden animal products, because there is nothing that's going to help you detoxify, and there's nothing redeeming about animal products that can help you overcome the toxin burden in those foods.
Indeed, and I think by focusing on fruits and vegetables, which are high in fiber as well, fiber helps the body detoxify a lot better. I would love to be able to get into some specific foods, as I share, that would actually aid the detoxification process, because I know there are a few herbs potentially that could actually help detoxify heavy metals. So before we get to that, I want to kind of backtrack to what you were sharing about glyphosate and what the impact is for those that are just new to this whole glyphosate ingredient. What is glyphosate, and what is the impact on the human body?
So glyphosate is Roundup. It's the most commonly used pesticide worldwide. And I think billions and billions of pounds are used every year, sadly. And it was initially patented as an antibiotic, but then later on used as a pesticide, because what it does is it shuts down the shikimate pathway in the bacteria, so that it can, in an organism, so it cannot, in these bugs, so it cannot survive. And the theory is that because humans, we don't rely on that shikimate pathway, we won't have any impact from ingesting glyphosate. But people have forgotten that we actually made up more of bacteria than human cells. And so when we ingest the glyphosate, it is having an impact on the trillions of gut bacteria that we have inside of our body, the microbiome that we are made up of. And we are now beginning to see more and more in the scientific research that the microbiome plays a huge role in so many different aspects of health: metabolic health, immune health, hormonal health, brain health. I don't think there is an area of body I can think of where the microbiome doesn't interact and play a role in. And so I think that's where the problem is, that when we ingest glyphosate, firstly, it's damaging our gut. It's causing what's kind of known as leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And that is damaging our gut microbiome. And 70% of our immune system is in the gut, and therefore we are damaging the immune system while we're doing that. And the glyphosate when it was tested, I don't think anybody knew the long-term impact of what it would do when it accumulated in a human body. And then more recently, we're beginning to find out the association between glyphosate and various cancers, neurological conditions. And so it's a toxin that really shouldn't be in our food systems.
In terms of leaky gut, so I mean, obviously there's a higher case of gut issues, gluten intolerance, celiac. Is that related to wheat per se, gluten, or is that more linked based on what you know linked to glyphosate itself and not really the wheat or gluten?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because there's a lot of people in the health and wellness space saying, no, it's not the gluten, it's not the gliadin, it's not the proteins causing sensitivity, it's the glyphosate. But I don't know if that's true. I think that's certainly possible that it's part of the explanation. And I think with health, there's always multiple factors at play, right? And there's always like a contribution of different things coming together, and it's the perfect storm. So I don't think it's just to do with the glyphosate. I think it's also to do with how the wheat, the crop, has been, well, they don't call it GMO'd, but they have definitely modified it. So the plant produces a lot more crop, and therefore there's a lot more gluten in the crops itself. And so, it's basically a food that the human body no longer recognizes, right? It's not natural anymore. So the human body is like, what is this thing? It's a foreign body. I'm going to, react to it, whether it's a true allergy or sensitivity, intolerance. So many people are reacting to gluten, myself included. And I just cannot, even organic gluten, organic wheat or whatever, I cannot tolerate. So I don't think it's just to do with glyphosate. I think it's definitely part of the picture. And whether it's the fact that glyphosate makes the gut leaky, and therefore proteins that shouldn't be getting through into our bloodstream now can cross that gut-blood barrier and being picked up by the immune system. Whereas if we didn't have leaky gut, those proteins will be kept in the gut lumen and never be seen. That could be a possibility, but I don't think we have the answer to that yet. Yeah.
So I want to go back to what you were saying about plastics and being in Singapore, where plastics are everywhere. We wrap plastic in plastic in plastic. That's the first time I've actually seen that. So where plastic is concerned, what are some chemicals in plastics that make it so detrimental for hormonal health or just health in general?
I think the main concern is really with endocrine disruption with plastic. And unfortunately, even fish is full of plastic, microplastics, because plastic is, being washed off into the stream and then getting into our ocean. And then obviously the fish lives in the ocean and is drinking the water and ingesting food. So I think that if you consume seafood, you may be consuming around like a credit card worth of plastics per year. So it's a really serious problem. And the concern with endocrine disruption is that it can affect your hormone balance, your metabolic health, but even your immune and psychological, so mental health as well. Because our endocrine system communicates with our immune system and communicates with our emotional, our brain health. So there's a lot of connection where it can play into the health of the body in many different ways. But the main concern there is with BPA, and I think most people have heard of BPA now, but they may not know that BPA was originally made or discovered and intended to be used as a estrogen, so an estrogenic medication. So in its place, they found something else called DES, but BPA became used in manufacturing instead of being used as a medication. But they already knew that it had estrogenic properties, and so in our bodies, it can act as a estrogen mimicker. It can act on our estrogen receptors. It can affect our gut health. It's been linked to so many different conditions like insulin resistance, weight weight issues, behavioral issues. And so, yeah, I think plastic is a really big problem.
You did a post a while back about BPA free, because I have a bottle here that says BPA free, and there's certain cans that say BPA free, and people are selling water bottles that are marketed as BPA free. But I understand that you shared that BPA free is not actually better. Can you explain that?
It may not be. It depends what the manufacturer used instead of BPA. They still need something that makes that water bottle hard, right? So that's what BPA does. It hardens plastic so that it takes shape. So some manufacturers are using BPS. So there's so many different components of the BP family that they could be using. And animal studies have suggested that they actually have pretty much similar effects as BPA in animals. So I personally prefer just to steer clear of plastic because I don't know what they have used. And so I like using stainless steel or glass bottles instead.
So stainless steel and glass bottles. I'm drinking from a stainless steel mug as well. So, yay, 1 point for me.
Yeah, good for you.
So, question. The next aspect that I would like to cover is cleaning products, because everybody opens up their cabinet and you see Jif, Mr. Muscle, Dynamo for the laundry detergent, and even just at any supermarket. And I'm just looking at going through the aisle, and I can't actually find a natural alternative. The brand that I normally use is no longer available, so I need to probably order it online. So based on your experience and based on what you research, what are the issues with some of the cleaning products, and what's the impact on the endocrine system or the immune system?
Yeah, there's several issues because what you're spraying to clean, that gets aerosolized. So you are inhaling a lot of the chemicals that are aerosolized. And so some of these chemicals are direct irritants. So they can irritate your eyes, respiratory tract, and trigger things like asthma. But moreover, some of these chemicals can actually, cross over into our bloodstream and be accumulated and, like you said, act as endocrine disruptor. And the thing that I want everybody to take away is look out for the term fragrance on your cleaning products or your personal care products, because this is like the naughty child of the family of chemicals that manufacturers can use to hide, several different hundreds of types of different chemicals under that umbrella term, fragrance. Because the regulation allow companies to hide chemicals under that term and call it proprietary because it's a trade secret. They say they don't want other companies to steal their formula, and so they don't have to disclose what they've put into fragrance. And a lot of the time, if you've washed your hair in the morning and you can still smell your shampoo in the afternoon or a few hours later, that's not normal, right? Because these scents, they're supposed to dissipate. They don't dissipate because of a common fixative called phthalate. And you probably would, have heard about phthalates because they, unlike BPA, which makes plastic hard, they make plastic soft and pliable. So they're in squidgy toys, shower curtains, the pliable plastic. But apart from the plastic that they're in, they can also be found in personal care products and cleaning products because they fix smell to the cleaning product really well. And so laundry detergent is like the commonly ridden by phthalates because, they need clothes to smell nice days and days after, right? So they combine the phthalate with the synthetic fragrance, and therefore the clothes continue to smell nice, but there's nothing fresh about it. People think, oh, it's, when my clothes smell good, it's fresh and clean, but actually it's full of toxic chemicals and you're polluting yourself. And the other place where phthalates are commonly found is in air fresheners. So those plugins or those room sprays, So phthalates it's an endocrine disruptor. It's an obesogen, so it can affect our metabolic health. It's been linked to insulin resistance, and it's also been linked to neurodevelopmental problems, fertility issues. So it can create a whole host of issues. So I highly recommend everybody to steer clear of the term fragrance unless they know what's being put in it. So the responsible companies may list fragrance, but then they'll have like a list of what it actually contains. So if it says fragrance and then, something like lavender essential oil, I'm okay with that. But if it's just fragrance by itself and they won't tell you and they say it's proprietary, I steer clear. So that's those are the kind of main things that I would be worried about with household cleaning products.
Indeed, I mean, with that in mind, I think of even things like orange juice. You say from concentrate and then nothing else. What's in the concentrate itself, isn't it? It's the same thing with fragrance, because they just say fragrance, and there's probably a whole long list of toxic chemicals that are in there. So I want to get back into toxic about the food system, because I was just thinking about things like Impossible and Beyond Meat, because right now in Asia it's come full force. And people are always asking me what's your take on Impossible, what's your take on Beyond. What I know, beyond the fact that it's a processed food, what's your take on these kinds of products?
I think they have a place for sure. And I think they can be really helpful if someone wants to transition to a plant-based diet, because it's really hard to adjust your taste buds, right? And it takes time. And if it helps somebody transition and reduce their intake of animal products and lessen the load on environmental damage, I'm all for it. Should people eat it every day for the rest of their lives? No, absolutely not. I think that it should be a transition food and be used in such a way so that if you have transitioned and you really, crave a burger, then yeah, by all means, eat a Beyond Burger so that you satisfy that craving and you can continue to make progress towards a whole food plant-based diet. I think it's definitely has a role in, as a small part of a diet, a healthy diet, but no more than a small part.
My little girl loves, we do go out once a week, and my little girl loves the Impossible Meat spaghetti. So she does have it once a week, but beyond that, it's of course, 100% whole food plant-based diet. Yeah. And with that in mind, with being a father and being parents, it's all about protecting our kids, providing the best environment, the safest environment for them to live and thrive in. So back to the beauty care products, for us, we try and shop for natural products that don't smell as much, those are, based on what you shared. But what are some steps that parents can take to provide a kind of like a toxic free environment for kids to live in? Because I mean, if you go to Toys R Us, there's plastic toys everywhere, and you look at they're marketing to kids, even foods as well. So it's a barrage of information, and sometimes parents are busy. Like I'm busy as well. So what are the first steps to parents kind of providing a safe environment for the kids?
Yeah, I think it can be totally overwhelming. And I think the first thing I want to start with is to say that there is no such thing as toxin-free environment. It just doesn't exist anymore, sadly. So I don't advise anybody to aim for 100% toxin-free. I think it's good to probably get into the mindset that we are probably going to face toxins sometimes and not try to strive for perfection, because otherwise that can get really overwhelming, and then you just start to almost go the other extreme and just be anxious and worried all the time, right? And it's important to remember that our bodies have natural detoxification organs, so we can encounter toxins and get rid of it completely and have no health consequences. But the key is to make sure that we remove the load from the body so that body can efficiently do its job, rather than overloading and then, it's overspilling and causing health issues. Now, in terms of where to start, I will start with food, because we eat so much of it. And pound for pound, children are smaller, right? So they're more prone to the damaging effect. Their detox systems are not so mature as adults. So they definitely can be more susceptible to the effects of toxins. So I would start with food again, like we talked about earlier. And then, water is a really important thing. We drink a lot of water as well. So that would be the next thing. So see if you can filter the water. And, and I don't mean buying bottled water, because bottled water and plastic, that's not going to be any better. Invest in whatever water filter you can afford. And it's a long-term investment. But, over a year, it costs less than buying bottled water. So I think it really pays off over the long term. And then, with children, depending on the age, because if you've got a toddler who's crawling on the floor, think about what's on the floor. Have you just laid down carpet? If you're going to lay down carpet, there's lots of carpet that's kind of stain resistant, and those are coated with the PFAS, forever chemicals and flame retardants. So, be mindful of where they're touching and interacting with the environment the most, right? You start with food, water, and and then you kind of observe and think about where they are spending most of their time, and try to think about what they could be exposed to. So, if the next thing I think would be personal care products for kids, right? Because a lot of moms like slathering babies with oils and lotions and things like that, or they sit in a bath for 20 minutes and they're using those bubble baths or whatever that may contain things like fragrance and endocrine disruptors. So just trying to pick better products in personal care products. So if I was to choose in the steps, it will be start with food, think about your water, think about the environment, so like flooring, furniture, the air. And then, if it's a small home and you're cleaning, that, make sure you're ventilating the rooms, like open the window if you're cleaning, because so that if there were toxins aerosolized, your child is not breathing in. But ideally they be in a different room and not in the same room as you cleaning. But I know it's not always possible, right? Especially moms who are at home with their children. But most cleaning products have those warning signs that they're not safe to be around children. So what does that say about what may be in those bottles, right?
You mentioned as well water. I think that's another topic that I'd like to dive into, because you mentioned filtered water. Maybe you could backtracking a little bit. What's the issue with tap water for a start? And I understand that with tap water, there is the fluoridation of tap water as well. What's the impact of fluoridation on the system?
There are so many different areas to consider with water. Firstly, yes, tap water has been treated and filtered, but only a handful of chemicals have standards set by the municipals that filter these waters. So outside of that, there's so many chemicals, we just discussed 86,000 chemicals in use, only a handful have standards. So what's happening with the rest of the chemicals, right? And these are probably present in very small amounts, and it depends on geographical area. So for example, some groundwater may contain arsenic from runoff from pesticide use, for example, and some well water may be contaminated with mercury. So it really depends on where you live. But EWG has a great water database, and you can type in your zip code and you can look up like known problems with water supply there, and you're going to see chemicals ranging from pesticides to the PFAS that we talked about, because these are released into or run off into the water from industrial processes when we manufacture things like Teflon, and then when we wash our clothes, the chemicals are run off into the water. So the water is basically like the basin collecting all of these chemicals from everyday use. And, it's disgusting to say, but toilet water is actually filtered and reused in tap water. So if somebody is on prescription medication, for example, I don't think there's a standard for filtering out all the prescription medications we have in the water filtration system. So there's going to be some that come through into drinking water. And, some reports have found that. So, it's chemicals ranging from pesticides to industrial chemicals to heavy metals to prescription medications that can be, all detected in the tap water. Now, it's not going to be at a level where you drink it and you're going to be sick, because that wouldn't be allowed. But, with these environmental toxins, what we don't know is what the impact of these chemicals at very low concentrations may have on our bodies over the long term. And also they may be interacting with each other synergistically, where 1 + 1 might equal 10, for example, And so I think it's really important to think about filtering the water. Now, going on to your point about fluoride, that's actually added, right? So that's added because it's thought to protect our teeth. Now, I can't argue against the fact that fluoride topically can protect us from cavities. So if you're eating a poor diet or you have genetic predispositions or health problems that predispose you to cavities, there may be a role for using fluoride toothpaste, follow your dentist's advice. But is there a role for putting fluoride into everybody's drinking water, even people who eat a good diet and have good dental health? I don't believe so. That's my personal opinion. And we know that fluoride can affect our thyroid health, can affect the pituitary gland, and can cause endocrine disruption in itself. So I'm not a fan of fluoride in my water, so I have a water filter that filters it out. No, thank you.
Fluoridation of water and toxic chemicals in the water. Maybe you could give us the 101 on choosing a good water filter, because when I look at the market, there's reverse osmosis, there's different brands, there's the ones that you put in the jug. Where should someone start, and what should someone look up for if they're wanting to invest in a water filter?
I think the first place to start is to look at your budget and see what you can afford, because what you can afford is going to be the best thing that you can go for. And I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, I need to take out a loan just to, get the most fancy water system. I know people who take out loans to do a whole house filter, when I think you should work with your budget and your finances to pick at the lowest hanging fruit, right? That's something that gives you the biggest return on money. So if the carbon filter, which is the pitcher type, the Brita, that's just like a single carbon filter. And that alone can do a lot by itself. And if that's all you can afford, then by all means use that. Now, there are different variations of that product, and some pitchers are better than others. So I would then go on to look at, so usually those companies will have reports that you can ask them for, and it will tell you what they filter out. And so, I would want to see that it filters out pesticides, heavy metals, the chemicals that you don't want, PFAS, and all these kind of things. So I would want to look for those. But I personally have a reverse osmosis filter, because I feel like it's the most robust system, because it's multi-stage and it's an active process. So water is forced through the system rather than having a gravity system. But the downside is that it does waste more water, because a lot of water is wasted in the process. And I get around it by saving the water that I use to wash my veggies and water my garden. So I can kind of feel better about my water wastage there. And also it can remove, because it's so good at removing contaminants, it can also remove useful things like minerals. But you and I, when we eat a whole food plant-based diet, it's actually pretty mineral rich, right? So if you eat sea vegetables, a wide variety of plants, you're going to get quite a decent amount of minerals there. So I don't actually worry too much about my water system depleting minerals. But if you're on a poor diet and you're not getting enough minerals from your diet, you may need to think about, do I need to be adding in mineral replacement and things like that?
The next aspect that I would like to cover as well is beyond water is plant-based protein powders, because now people are starting to be aware of the impacts, negative impacts of whey protein, bloating gas, and acceleration of cancer growth potentially down the track as well. So looking to plant-based protein, and I think we had this discussion last year about the Clean Label project. So rather than go into that, maybe you could suggest how people can choose or select a plant-based protein wisely, because I know yourself and Dr. Gonzalez, you guys did like the top brands that are probably the cleanest. But what I noticed is a lot of those brands aren't actually available in outside of the US. So I think that's been a kind of like setback for me to suggest people, okay, what brands to go for. So maybe you can share for those who want to invest in a plant-based supplement, what should they look out for and how should they select?
Yeah, that can be really difficult, because really ultimately the only thing that tells you whether it's a good protein powder in terms of contaminants is just by toxicity report. So the way we compile that report, this is our report, right, is by reaching out to companies. And we literally emailed the companies and asked them for report. And actually a lot of people didn't come back to us. And again, I think I don't know whether, maybe tested bad, they don't want to give it to us. They said it's proprietary information. Now, how can it be proprietary? All the report shows is, pesticide levels, heavy metal levels. It tells you nothing about how it's made and, the different ingredients. But anyway, I would say the best thing you can do if you're really concerned is to reach out to the companies and ask them for the report. And I've actually done a post to teach people how to calculate what's a good level based on that report, because it actually depends on how much you consume. A lot of the levels are quoted as ppm, so parts per million. And you have to convert that into like micrograms, because these things are usually calculated in micrograms. And then you have to convert it into how many micrograms you're consuming in 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon. I don't know, you guys may be consuming up to 6 tablespoons a day. I'm guessing. I don't know what athletes consume, but I know some people who are like trying to bulk up or really go add a lot of protein, they consume multiple tablespoons, right? And that can easily take you over the limit. And I've not personally seen a report where it says heavy metals 0. Okay, so I think it's all about the amount. And I think the important thing to remember is that people get so focused on this because of the Clean Protein Project. But there's heavy metals in your food, right? So in produce, that like every day we're consuming produce and foods with heavy metal. Rice, for example, may contain arsenic. And so that brings me back to the point I made earlier about, don't expect like a toxin-free life. Do the best that you can, but don't get overly obsessed and like start getting anxious and then like excessively planning and not participating in normal social interactions because you're too scared of the contaminants. Because we've got to trust our body. And the way I get around it is that I do things to boost my detoxification. So I may be eating out with friends where I'm not eating organic food, and that's okay. I'm not going to panic about that, because I know when I come back I'm going to eat my clean food and I'm going to do things to try and help my body get rid of these toxins.
Moral of the story is progress one step forward over perfection and purity.
Okay.
I think that's
definitely the case. And then, I think with protein powders, you definitely want to be looking out for nasty ingredients that may be added. Like some people still use artificial coloring and flavoring in their protein powders because they don't taste good, right? Like protein powders, I think typically don't taste that great unless you add stuff to make it taste better. So you want to be looking out for excessive sugar and artificial, flavoring synthetic chemicals that could be added to boost the flavor profile.
Yeah, and I think what I always share with people as well is if you can invest in a vegan company as well, because they're there for the ethics as well. So they probably have a higher standard towards the products that they're producing versus a non-vegan company that just sees a market in the vegan community. Oh, maybe we should do a plant-based protein because there's a market there. So I think that could be a start. Invest in a vegan company who's probably into a sustainable and environmental aspects of what and maybe even having the vegan label there as well. I think that's another aspect. So progress over perfection, and I think this is just really for me as well. Right now I'm also looking at EMF, and with 5G being rolled out everywhere, what's the impact as a final point, and what's an impact on EMF exposure? Is there any issues? Should we be concerned about it? Because let's say if I turn off my Wi-Fi router and you just see signals everywhere, especially when you're in an apartment block. So is there any issue with long-term exposure to EMF? How does that affect the system?
Yeah, I think we don't have the answers to that yet. There is no long-term data on human health, but there are some animal studies, and I think there's like one study that showed a possible increased incidence of this type of neuroma. So I think the jury is out on, but from a mechanistic point of view, it just doesn't sound like the kind of thing we want to be exposing ourselves to, right? Because at the end of the day, we are made up of atoms, which are kind of like, electric. There's an electrical component to that we have an electric field around us. And that EMF is going to affect that field. And also, I think there's some cellular studies showing that the EMF can affect some calcium channels, and that's how we cells communicate with each other. So it could possibly affect cellular function and cause oxidative stress, DNA breaks, possibly. I think those things are being researched right now, and I would definitely be very interested. But personally, I am I'm very aware of my EMF exposure. But like you said, it's really difficult to get away from it. And there's so many devices on the internet, like, how to stick something on the back of your phone. I don't really know if those work. I think there's maybe even some argument that it could amplify the signal from your phone because it's interrupting, so it's just sending out more signal. Like if you're receiving signal on your phone, there's gonna be EMF, right? So the only way to get away from it is just to not be on the phone so much. And yeah, it's definitely easier said than done, and I definitely need to be more mindful of how much screen time and things I spend. But EMF is not just from your phone and laptops. It's from all electrical devices, right? So it could be, alarm clocks apparently give out really high EMF. Baby monitors can. So, you don't want those wireless baby monitors. You want like those that you plug in and have it like as far away from the baby as possible where you can still hear them. Hair dryers can generate EMF. So I think it's part of our life. It's about, again, trying to lessen the damage and trying to reduce exposure, right? So that's all part of healthy living. Like if you are sleeping enough, your body can recuperate from the damage. If you're eating a good diet, the antioxidants can help. Like, I think that chaga mushroom is a powerful antioxidant and has been shown to maybe counteract some of the oxidative stress caused by EMF. Again, not proven, but it's just these things that if they don't cause any harm, then I'm okay trying them.
Yeah, and I know that now they're starting to, my wife Emily actually bought it, EMF blocking blanket. I'm not sure what the efficacy of that is. And I know a line of EMF blocking clothes has just been launched as well. I just noticed that. So that's going to be interesting. I think maybe I might look at investing in that, especially in the airplane. But you're right in saying, and I think that's the initial discussion that we had about social media and our children and our phones. We can't escape it. but we can have conversations of it on it, to be more aware of it, and to have, I think the first step to change is awareness with anything.
Right.
And then you just kind of take one step forward based on where you are relative to where you are.
But I actually think the blanket makes more sense than like a disc that you stick on the back of your phone, because you're protecting your body, right? And your body is not generating the EMF signals, whereas your phone is the device. You don't want to be covering up your phone. You want to cover your body. So I actually think she might be onto something there.
Indeed. And I think the reason why she bought that is because we're hoping for, down the track for another second one, and especially for pregnant mums, to have that little blanket and that cover over the baby that's growing, I think, because it's just so vulnerable that to anything and everything. So I think that's really but yeah, it's great to hear that she's on the, I'm gonna let her know.
If I'm gonna buy anything, that's what I would buy,
Indeed. So I guess back into the start of our conversations, I want to go with the takeaway pieces now. Very practical tips for people. I mean, first you shared that there was first look at what you're eating, and then what you're drinking, your products that you're using on your body as well. So maybe you could share some specific foods that people can start incorporating more of. I know a whole food plant-based diet would be kind of the base, but beyond that, you mentioned garlic. Is there any other foods that you would recommend that it could be just your top 5 maybe, that people can just start incorporating more of in their lives to really bulletproof their immunity and health?
Immunity or detoxification?
Maybe let's go for detoxification and immunity. Maybe your top.
Okay. So for detoxification, actually a lot of them overlap. So it will be the cruciferous family vegetables, because they really help the liver to detox. So we're talking the things like broccoli, bok choy, kale, arugula, those kind of foods. And there's a trick to broccoli as well. So if you cut it up before you cook it and leave it for 10-15 minutes, you can actually boost the sulforaphane content of your broccoli, or sprinkle on some mustard powder, because that adds back the enzyme that would have converted the compound into sulforaphane. So that would be my top cruciferous vegetables, and I try to get 2 to 3 servings of that per day into my diet. And then I really like the allium family. So that's the garlic, that's your chives, leeks, because that can also help detox and is also has immune boosting properties. And then berries are great sources of antioxidants and vitamin C. And when the liver actually breaks down chemicals, it goes into this intermediate phase where it could be more toxic to the body. And so what neutralizes that intermediate compound is antioxidants. So you want your diet to be full of antioxidants. The citrus family is also a really good source of vitamin C. It can help. The limonene is a powerful antioxidant. And there's some studies, I don't know if you've been following it, there's some studies showing that zinc may be helpful in SARS-CoV-2. Obviously, I'm not telling anybody that anything is a cure or prevention for COVID. The only thing that's been shown to work is washing your hands, and you've got to follow your public health protocols. But these foods are beneficial for other health purposes anyway. So, I have no problems incorporating more of that into my diet. But zinc needs to work inside of a cell. And so there are things called zinc ionophores that help zinc get inside a cell to where it needs to be to work. And things like the peel of lemons and orange contain flavonoids that act as zinc ionophores. So that's actually present in a lot of different fruits and vegetables again, and that's why whole food plant-based diet is so crucial. But orange, green tea, onions, spinach, so many things can actually contain these flavonoids. And then vitamin D is actually really crucial for immune health. And I think the best place to get it is sun. So that's not really a food, but a lot of people think of it, it's a nutrient. So, and we get it from the sun. And now it's winter for you, right? But summer for us in the northern hemisphere.
Summer all year round for us to a certain
degree.
Oh
yeah, okay, yes, that's true. Yeah. So it's really important to get some sunshine and do it safely without burning. And then zinc is really important for immune health, like I talked about earlier. So you'll be getting that from your legumes, nuts and seeds, and a really good way to increase the bioavailability of zinc is to soak and sprout your legumes and nuts and seeds, because that kind of releases the phytic acid, which usually binds to zinc and prevents absorption. So of course, ginger and turmeric, and both have immune boosting properties and also can help our body detoxify.
That's really the 101 on optimizing your plant-based diet if you aren't already. So, well, I'd like to say thank you very much, Dr. Chen. I mean, it's I look back at the very first time we met at the Switch for Good, and it was in the bus. And I've been following. It was in the bus, our first conversation. So, and just that's been a couple of years ago, and I've just been following your journey. And of course, I'm going to put your social media information with this interview, because you share a lot of great stuff on your Instagram account, and I absolutely love the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Luke. Well, I feel the same way about you. You're doing really good work. Spreading the message, and I love your work around mindset. It's so inspiring. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.